You sure? Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. So we do have a guest speaker, and that guest speaker is Cece Robles, and she is the director for the MLS and also for professional standards. I've had the pleasure of working her for a number of years now, as a matter of fact, right? So she's going to cover a number of things in regards to the rules and regulations. And also there's going to be some questions I think that I'm going to raise. And also this is your opportunity to raise questions with her. And if you have anything you'd like to bring up to her about your own personal listings or transactions, things of that nature, this is your opportunity, right? So let's welcome Cece. Cece, please come on up. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Richard and Carlos, for inviting me today. So I want to talk to you guys about the top violations that we have going on. So the first one that we have going on is Rule 7.8. For those of you who don't know what that rule is, 7.8 is anytime you have a listing, how many days do you have to enter? How many days do you have to enter that listing?
Anybody? Take a guess.
2 days.
Very good, Jonathan.
Is it 2 business days or 2 calendar days?
Yes.
Okay, the reason I'm asking because this is the $1,500 fine, right? So anytime you do have a listing, right, you do need to enter the listing within 2 calendar days. And the option is you either enter that listing within 2 calendar days of the beginning date of the contract, or you have the option to enter that listing into the MLS 2 days after you got the last signature on the contract. Right, let's say that you have a married couple, for whatever reason, the wife was away, you only got a signature from the husband, right? A week later, you get the signature from the wife. Well, if you get it a week later, you technically have 2 days from when the wife signed it to enter it into the MLS, right? Mm-hmm. But while you're waiting for that signature, please do not market that listing. Because if you do market that listing, people will report you. Sometimes it happens within the same office, sadly. But once they report you, whether you have that signature, they're going to ask you for a copy of the listing agreement, right? And you're going to say, well, I haven't put it in the MLS, Cece, because I haven't gotten the listing agreement, but you're marketing the property, right? So they're going to ask you, hey, John, I need you to give me your listing agreement, and you have 1 day to do it, and we're going to fine you $1,500. CRMLS is going to review that complaint and say, well, you know what? John is right. He doesn't have to enter it. However, they're going to send it to the association because now you'll be in violation of Article 1, Article 3, and Article 9 because you're advertising a property where you don't have all that documentation signed. You're pretty much not being honest with the public saying like, hey, I'm actually representing this listing. I have exclusive listing because now you have a signature missing, right? So sometimes people try to play that game to be like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to enter this listing because I still haven't done the signature, but I'm going to go ahead and promote it. You can't have it both ways, unfortunately. Yes.
So there's one exception. If you don't have all necessary signatures, you can disclose that in the MLS, indicating that it's subject to obtaining those remaining signatures, correct? So if you put that disclosure in the MLS, then that is an opportunity. If,
right? Yeah. If, and I'm gonna be honest, it depends on CRMLS compliance.
I see. All right.
So I just want to be really honest. You can put that disclosure because as the listing agent was like, well, Cece, I'm being transparent because I put it in the private remarks, right? But keep in mind, these private remarks doesn't go to the consumer. So at the end of the day, what really matters right now with all these lawsuits with consumers, it's how we portray to the consumer. Because people in the MLS, they have access to that, so they can see that, right? But a consumer doesn't, and then they'll call mad and report you. And when a consumer does that, then it's up to CRMLS to make a decision. So I always want to tell people, yeah, you could put that. However, keep in mind that that remark can only be in private remarks. If it was available to put in the public remarks, well, you're pretty much covered because that's being syndicated to third-party sites where consumers can see that information. So with that said, if you have a listing, put it in the MLS within 2 calendar days, right? And you can either put it as a registered listing, a coming soon listing, and an active listing. So under a registered listing, that means that your seller has said, hey, you know what, Cece, I want to list my property 123 Main Street. However, I want to exclude the listing from the MLS for a certain period of time, or I want to exclude it for the entire time of the listing, right? Or you can put it in coming soon. And under, I love coming soon because coming soon, you're able to put it in the MLS. You're able to market the property to anyone, do an email blast. There's no days on market that counts on you. The only thing is that you cannot show it to anyone, and it can only be on coming soon for 21 days. Okay. Now, people always try to get under this rule saying, hey, you know what? I'm gonna put this listing in coming soon. They went to the marketing meeting. They said, hey, I have a listing on 123 coming soon. It's on the MLS. It's going to be available to show on Saturday. However, this somebody in the marketing means, hey, I have a client. He's really good. We want to go see it. And they're like, well, you can't see it because once I let you see it, I have to put that property into active. So a lot of coming soon agents that have that listing, if there's a text message that you let them see the property and you still have it under that status, it is a $2,500 fine just with that text message. So just be really, really careful. Okay, and if the client wants to submit an offer, they can always submit an offer contingent on seeing the property. Okay, any questions regarding Rule 7.8?
Yes, in regards to coming soon. So I'm seeing listings in which they're being churned. They're putting in the coming soon. And then they're canceling the listings and shortly thereafter, they're coming back in the market and coming soon.
Well,
It still appears to be in compliance.
and it is in compliance because if I were to audit that listing agent can say, yeah, Cece, I had a listing agreement. The seller's saying they're coming soon, but I also have a cancellation. Now I have a new listing agreement. So when an agent has all the documentation, well, technically he's in
They're in
compliance. Is it a way that agents are playing the system? I'll go ahead and leave that up to you.
Yeah, I'd say the answer is yes. But it could
Playing
be
within the
effective,
bounds
as a
of the
matter of
system.
fact.
Okay, but just be really careful because the last thing you want, it's a hefty fine, and they're not fines like before. Before we used to get $100 fines. Before we used to get a warning, right? Now we don't. So just be really, really careful with that. Any questions in regards to that rule?
If you could just explain, if you're going to be putting a property in the coming soon status, what the listing agent must do. For example, they must get the coming soon form signed concurrent with the listing contract, not at a later date or dated at a later date.
Yes, that's correct. You guys know where to get that form, the coming soon form, the CRMLS form. It is on our website. It's also part of your SIP forms. If you log into SIP forms, and I think they added the disclosure from Orange County, you guys have two different libraries. If you go to SIP forms, you'll have the California Association Library, and then you're going to have other options as Orange County Realtors. And I think there's CRMLS, but under Orange County Realtors, there's two forms available for you to use. The Orange County Disclosure and the coming soon from CRMLS. Keep in mind that by being a member of the Orange County Realtors, you guys are the only ones that have that disclosure. Just so you know, we've gotten a lot of requests where other agents that are not out of the area that want to use that disclosure want to use that. OCR is kind of working to make that available to other agents, but just know that that's exclusive just for you guys. So take advantage of that, and it's available for you. If for whatever reason, after we're done with this call, you don't know where it's at, I'll leave you my business card and I can walk you through that. Okay, but yes, just make sure that you have both the listing agreement and coming soon if you want to use that status, because CRMLS is auditing listings, especially when they see something that's canceled and coming soon again, just like the example you gave. I know that's very popular right now because I've been called in to, hey, what's going on? And it's like, well, they have the documentation, so they're not in violation, right? Just be really, really careful that you have it all together. You can't have the listing agreement and then 20 days later saying, I have it coming soon. You need to have it all together. Okay, any questions in regards to that?
Thank you for explaining that.
Have a question.
Yes.
There's a name, time limit for like to post the coming soon, like.
So you have 2 calendar days. So anytime you have a listing agreement, you have 2 calendar days and you have 3 statuses to choose from. Either you choose registered, you choose coming soon, or you choose active. Those are your 3 options, but you have to do it within 2 calendar days. And if you're going to exclude the listing from the MLS, please be sure that you also have an SCLM or that the listing agreement has checked off that your seller is willing not to exclude it for a certain period of time. Okay? Yes. So register means that anytime your seller says, hey, you know what, Cece, I don't want this listing to be showing to the MLS. I want to keep it off the market for a certain period of time because I still want to do some remodeling. I still want to do something on it, right? But as a listing agent, you want to get that listing agreement, right? So you're like, yeah, I'll go ahead and accommodate that for you, Jen. No problem. We can list the property. We'll put it on register. The only people that can see it under register status is your office, you, your association, and CRMLS compliance. So nobody else sees that listing because it's excluded from the MLS. And typically people like to use the exclusion forms. Sometimes there's clients that are, very private, they're judges, they don't want anything to be out there for them. So this is why they exclude the listing from the MLS.
So what it means, it could be in other side, but not.
It would not be another sites. It would only be under register status under CRMLS. So register status doesn't syndicate to third-party sites. Pretty much is like the office has this listing and it's going to stay within a private network, if that kind of makes sense.
I think where the confusion comes under a clear collaboration policy, the one day of actually marketing the property.
Oh,
If you would explain that.
so let's just say that you have a listing agreement today, right? You get it signed. You have 2 days to put it into the MLS, right? But if you start marketing the listing without putting it into the MLS, that's when CRMLS is going to say, hey, you know what, CC? You need to enter this property into the MLS within 1 business day, and we need a copy of a listing agreement to check the accuracy of your contract. Now, if the accuracy of your contract doesn't match to the rule, then that's when that $1,500 fine kicks in. Not only that, you get days on market on your listing, doesn't give you the opportunity to actually prepare this for your client. So that's what that is.
And another way that people use the register status is if you have a couple options. If you go to a listing appointment today and you want them to sign beginning today, but the house is not ready to show, you can put today's date as the beginning date, but don't market it until like a month from now.
Yeah, the start marketing.
Yeah, start marketing date.
And now the DAM as opposed to DOM, right?
So now you're registering it with the MLS, letting them know you have the listing, and the alternative would be the beginning date is going to be a month from now. And then, but if someone else sells it between now and then you're out of luck.
So let me give you an example so I can play it out for you how you can use the 3 statuses with 1 listing agreement, okay? Let's say that Richard Moore is my client, right? And I want to get that listing agreement, but Richard's like, hey, you know what, TC? I have to get my house ready. It's the end of the month. I want to do something. I don't want the listing to hit the market till September 1st. But as a listing agent, I want Richard to sign the contract today. So I said, you know what, Richard, client, you're right. We can definitely do that for you. What we're going to do is that we're going to sign the listing agreement today. We're going to go ahead and enter it into the MLS as a register status, meaning that no one can see it, only my office, which is just your broker, right? And on September 1st, you see, I want to create the buzz around the listing. So on September 1st, I want the listing to go from registered to coming soon. You can leave it on coming soon for 21 days, or if you get an offer submitted, you go ahead and change it to active. So that's how you can kind of create that buzz of using that listing. So that's an example of like the register status, how it plays in.
But later on, when people, they look at the listing, it shows how many days was in a market.
So
it would start from active date.
So that's a good question. So when your listings in register status, when your listings in coming soon, you're not going to have any days on market. When that listing goes active, that's when your dates on market days on MLS start for you. Okay. Any questions?
So it's interesting about registered status versus coming soon. Coming soon status, you cannot show the property. But if it's registered and you have a disclosure regarding agency relationships signed, you can actually show the property to your client. We can disseminate that information to everybody in the office, and we can only disseminate it to those people under whose license is affiliated with that broker's license. And that is not considered public marketing. So you wouldn't actually have to make it active on the MLS at that point in time.
Yeah, but your buyer does need to have that agency
disclosure
sign with your office, because CRMLS is going to ask for a copy of it. Somebody reports you, so you're like, yeah, I showed it. If CRMLS said, hey, Cece, we received a report that you showed this property. I'm like, I sure did. I showed it to one of my clients who's registered with us. Here's the office exclusion. And that's how you don't get the fine. But if you show it and you can't provide the documentation that that client has an office agency disclosure with your company, they're gonna hit you $1,500 fine. It's not even gonna be a warrant for that. So I always like to tell my agents, please be really careful. If you don't know before you list it, please call me. Because after you list it and you call me, I know a lot of people think like, well, you're the director, Cece. Can you just like do it? I'm like,
Make it disappear.
make it disappear. Why can't you just waive it for me? I've been a member for 30 years. And I'm like, I know you think I have that power, but CRMLS took that power away from association. So I always tell people, if you have a question, please call me before you enter it. Because after you enter it, I can only help you how to like prove to them. And unfortunately, you do have to pay that fine. Okay, and that's the last thing I want you guys to give more money to CRMLS.
Are people getting fined for that?
Yes. It's a very popular fine.
Actually, that is a line item in CRMLS's finance budget. The fines, they estimate at least $400,000 a year in fines.
Wow,
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
Yes.
I'm not privy
So
to
they're counting on that
documentation.
in terms of supporting the CRMLS budget.
Yes.
Orange County Realtors doesn't benefit from it, it's CRMLS that does.
Yeah, when we start register, it goes into draft. And it, start putting the information and it's like a draft. In,
So under register status is not a draft. So has anybody registered a listing in the MLS? Okay, so you know when you log into the MLS, you go into this dashboard, right? And in order for you to log into the MLS, you have to click on that tile matrix, right? To access the MLS, right? Well, for you to register the listing, under that dashboard, you're gonna see where it says home, then you're gonna see something that says register. You're gonna click it there, and that's where you register the listing. So when you register a listing, please note that you're not registering the listing in the MLS. They're talking about when somebody's starting a listing and then they save it as an incomplete, right?
Yeah.
That's not a register listing.
Oh.
Okay, that's just you working on a listing that hasn't gone active yet. A registered listing means that you have an actual listing agreement with an actual agreement that's live.
when it's incomplete, it's still can show the property.
Well, do you have an active listing agreement to show the property? Because if you do, then why is the listing an incomplete? It should be completed.
Well, I came across with showing a property that the owner already have the client. So they show the property when before even the start marketing and things, and they show the property because it was my neighbor, and I knew that he's going out, and I have the client next to me, and they gave it to me, but they already have the client. But the listing agent has to do the whole thing.
So that's a different scenario, right? So you're talking about scenario where it's your neighbor, you know that he's gonna put the property for sale, you know that he's working with another listing agent, right? However, before the seller and the listing agent get that agreement signed, you, the neighbor, already have a client wanting to make this deal happen, right? That's a little bit different because there's no actual listing agreement. It's just like, hey, this is going to happen. However, the seller can decide whether he wants to list it on the MLS or if he wants to make this deal happen off the MLS. So that has nothing to do with register. That's why I said the listing agent needs to have a signed listing agreement by the seller.
Yeah, either you do or you don't.
Mhm.
That's really what it comes down to.
So if you don't have it, that means that you cannot put it in register, coming soon, or active. Any questions regarding that? Because that is a good question.
There's a question on Zoom. Can registered listing be marketed in all other local ways?
No, because that's considered public marketing. Open houses, you have other consumers, unless those consumers have an office agency disclosure signed with your company at those open houses, then you can. But if you don't do it.
It's a good way to get buyers to sign up with you, huh? At the door.
I'm not here to talk about how to make clients. That's gonna leave that up to you guys, the experts.
But you can't market it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You
So
can't market it,
Yeah.
putting a sign out
Yeah.
front is marketing. So
Yeah,
you
so
put
if you
tags,
could-
put on the MLS.
yeah, so if you do an email blast just within your office about this listing and you do an email blast and your clients don't have an office exclusive, that's considered marketing property. But if you do an office blast within your office and the people that you're sending it to have an office agency with your office, you're in compliance. I know it's confusing because it's like, well, I'm technically marketing it, CC.
I would say nobody ever gets an agency relationship disclosure signed before they're writing a purchase contract or taking a listing contract.
I agree, but
Yeah.
Irvine thinks different.
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting, just to get an agency disclosure sign, you can do that. You can do that.
Yeah.
That's available to you.
So is it very popular? Not really, but
It's included in the BRBC though, right, in the packet?
Yeah, but it's associated with another document, right? So why would, that's the point. Once you're getting the BRBC sign, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Or you're getting a listing contract signed, it's not an issue. It's just if you're trying to show someone or introduce a property to somebody with whom you have no contractual relationship and you want to show the property, even then before you show the property, you do need a BRBC sign.
so.
The same in inside California.
So it's only the rule if you belong to CRMLS. So if you belong to SCAR, I honestly am not familiar with their rules. I know that every MLS that belongs to NAR, which is CLAW and SCAR, do have to have clear cooperation policy in place because that is the rule. However, every MLS does it different. I'll give you a perfect example. I just said CRMLS under coming soon. You can't show it, right? With Claw has coming soon. I don't know if you guys have done with Claw. Claw gives their agent an option. Hey, I want to put it in coming soon, but are you going to show it? We're going to give you days on market. If you're not going to show it, then we won't give you days on market.
So is that?
That's Claw. That's the MLS in LA. Mhm. But I know a lot of some of our members are like borderline that belong to both of them. And sometimes they're like, I get confused, Cece, because CRMLS says no and Class says yes, right? So I get that sometimes it's challenging to our members when it comes to that. But I do want to point that out. If you belong to CRMLS, please do not show the property under coming soon. Because if you show it, right, let's say that you say, hey, you know what, Cece, I want to show my client this house because I have a solid offer. They just need to see it, right? Let's say that you let them go see it and they don't submit an offer to your seller. Guess what? Now you have to put that property to active because you showed it.
So it's not where the property is located, it's which.
MLS.
MLS.
That's correct. So your property could be located in LA, but if you're part of CRMLS, you have to follow the CRMLS rules. I know.
If you have a property outside of the realm of CRMLS, you don't have to put it into CRMLS.
You don't.
But CRMLS is the largest MLS in all of California also. So geographically, it's massive.
So if you don't belong to, but if you belong to CRMLS and you're marking your property not entrant, they are gonna fine you. And
I had a question. So if you have a listing off-market transaction where you just represented the seller and the buyer, they already knew each other, you're gonna do the transaction, and you want to upload the listing into the MLS for comp purposes or whatever, what's the process for that?
So
For
you
someone
can-
that wants to do that?
that's a good question, and you can definitely do that. CRMLS gives you 30 days after the transaction closes, something like that, to enter the listing into comps. Keep in mind that when you do that, enter the listing, you have to enter the listing within 30 days at the listing close. CRMLS is going to ask you for a copy of that listing agreement.
So if it's a single party conversation, then that doesn't count, or does it? Can you
So-
use that?
So that's a good question. Okay, so a lot of agents are like, hey, you know what, TC, I didn't have a listing agreement. However, I had a single party showing. When you have a single party showing agreement, you don't enter that listing into the MLS. If you want to enter that listing for comparable purposes to count as you as one of your listings you sold, you can. They're going to require you to a copy of the listing agreement and a copy of the finding closing statement. And then you enter that property. When you do run comps, they're going to put it under a different section, because if you put it under the same section with listings that go in the MLS regularly, it's going to be off. And the reason it's going to be off is because the days on market affects a listing. So that's why when you put it for comparable purposes, you can enter it. It's going to give you credit. It's going to show on there for comparable purposes for appraisers to use that data, but it's going to be in a separate field to go ahead and make that make sense. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Got a question. My sister's afraid. She called me. There's a little builder out in San Diego Canyon. They're building a new home. And so she's trying to do this appraisal, and it shows 5.6 and 5.5. Well, I looked it up on title, and it was 4.7 and 4.8. Now, I don't know if that has difference between upgrades or anything, but it was back in March, and they just put, it was sold 2 weeks ago. So obviously that's a violation, correct?
Well, who put it in there? The agent.
The agent, whoever's representing this little building, it actually sold like in March or something last year anyway. They didn't say it was 8 month difference between. It actually sold according to title, and what they put in on the MLS. They're using it for like comp purposes.
Honestly, when something like that happens, you have 30 days. If you go past the 30 days, the MLS doesn't catch it, but if somebody reports you, it's a fine. So I always say people, if you want this for comparable purposes, I would do it the day that it closed. You don't have to wait the whole 30 days to do it, but that's how much CRMLS is giving you. Now, if you're passing past the 30 days, I don't know if you spoke to someone in CRMLS compliance that allow that, but they don't allow that.
And we got the discrepancy between $800,000. I don't think close that, and what theirs going to close.
Well, that goes back to, that's another rule. That's MLS rule 8.3, the accuracy of information in the MLS, right? So if you're seeing this, like you're saying, hey, you know what, this property sold in March and I'm trying to list it in January, but I'm looking at title that this is how much it sold, but the MLS shows that it sold this, then bring it up to my attention and we can go ahead and get that corrected. Okay. Any other questions? And I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm not here to like, you know, lay down the law and stuff. I'm just trying to be here because the last thing I want is for CRMLS to say, hey, I need this and this and this. And I'm like, I didn't know that. But it's like, well, you're supposed to know that. You know, you're making money off this listings. For a lot of people think like, well, I didn't know that, Cece. I'm a brand new agent. It doesn't matter. You could be a brand new agent and you could do a whole mess. If you're a brand new agent, then you shouldn't be handling that listing. You should be giving it to an expert and you take a referral fee. But if you want to take the whole money, then you have to also follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, there's consequences. Right?
So a couple things, actually, I've got a number of things. Changing the status to hold or from hold to active again. What must an agent do before changing the status? And what are the issues if you don't get it in writing?
So that's a good question. That goes under Rule 8.3. That's accuracy information, right? So anytime your seller says, hey, you know what, Cece, I want to put this listing on hold because I'm gonna go on vacation. I don't want nobody coming into my house while I'm on vacation. I just don't feel comfortable, right? Keep in mind that you do have to get a modifications or terms or an addendum saying your client is telling you to put this property on hold for a certain period of time. During hold, your listing's inactive and there's no 0 days on market, right? But you also cannot show it. Because hold, you're saying that it's not inactive. And if you show it to someone, then now you're showing that you're showing preference to somebody else, which I know you guys wouldn't do that, right?
Never.
You guys would never do that. I know that. No, Orange County Realtors do not do that. But if they do catch you, it's a $250 fine. And keep in mind, I have a lot of people that say, oh, I'll just pay the fine. I'll just pay the fine, right? But about 2 years ago, CRMLS said, hey, you know what? A lot of people are just like, oh, it's a cost of doing business, right? Well, CRMLS says if you get 3 citations in 1 year, you no longer have the option just to pay that citation. What they're going to do is that they're going to create a disciplinary hearing. They're now going to make a formal complaint against you, and your broker gets added to that complaint because they feel for a person to have 3 citations, you really don't care. And there's a lack of supervision from Richard, but I know there isn't. But however, they'll go ahead and add them automatically. And not only that, you have to pay the fine. And if you go through a disciplinary process and the panel decides to give you a fine, guess what? Now you have to pay CRMLS a fine, the association a fine, and because the panel gave you a fine, have you guys heard of the CAR shame of law? Have you told them about the wall of shame? Yeah, you guys know about that?
No.
Oh, you haven't.
Yes.
You haven't told them, Richard?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so anytime anybody files a complaint against you, and not CRMLS, I'm talking about disciplinary hearing where they feel you're in violation of the articles or MLS rules. If the panel finds you in violation and the panel decides that they're either going to give you a letter of reprimand, a fine, suspend you or expel you or report you to the Department of Real Estate, after the hearing is over, your findings of fact of that case, along with your picture, is going to be uploaded to CAR's page and then everybody can see why you're in violation. So it's available, keep it, so you just want to be careful. Not only that, do you really want to be on their site for that? You don't.
So does an email suffice for proof of the seller asking you to put it on hold, or does it have to be on a form?
I honestly think if it's in writing, it's in writing, right? You can have a contract, be writing on a napkin.
Yeah.
You have to write an agreement.
Okay.
So I think that's sufficient. It's up to your brokerage whether they ask you to use an actual form or not. That's going to be up to your brokerage. But yes, that should be sufficient.
How about pending, is it important or not?
Well, what's your question in regards to pending?
I mean, is it the days that, you should put it as a pending or, sometimes?
Well, this is the rule. 8.3 says that you need to be accurate in your information, right? So if you got an offer submitted today, but you think the offer is kind of iffy, you're like, whatever, I'm not going to change it pending. I'm just going to leave it inactive. Well, that's inaccurate because technically you have an offer submitted. So not only are you being inaccurate to your MLS, but this listing is still showing active to the consumer. So now you're misleading and being deceptive to the consumer. So I would think that's important. So that's a $250 fine.
Yeah, because sometimes before, listing, they say that we do have an offer, but we get a second offer. And, and it still shows as an act.
So does it show active under contract or just shows active? Okay, so if it just shows active, it's a violation. If it shows active under contract, that means that you have an offer submitted. However, the offer is kind of iffy. The seller's still willing to entertain backup offers. So if you see a listing, when you call the listing agent and it's active and he's telling you, oh, you know what, we have an offer submitted, but it's not really solid. You can go in and submit it. That's a violation. Because what about that offer goes through? Now, not only did you waste your time writing that offer, but now you look back to your buyer. Because it's like, what are you going to tell to your buyer, right? So if you have an offer, either change that status from pending or active under contract, because this might not be a violation of the MLS rule, but it's a violation of the code of ethics. You're being misleading. Okay.
And that's true if it's a contingent offer also that was accepted. So
Yeah. So change it.
Accepted and it's contingent, you still must change the status. Could you address showing instructions, the failure to follow showing instructions?
No, that's so popular this year. That's MLS Rule 13.7, right? And I'll just give you an example of how that's a violation. 13.7, that's what happens when a buyer's agent is not following the showing instructions. So let's say that on a Saturday, you have 3 properties to show your client, right? You're showing the property and you're like, oh my God, I just saw that the property across the street came on market. Let's go see it. It has a lockbox. But you failed to check the showing instructions, and the showing instructions said appointment only. That's a $1,500 fine. And you're like, oh my God, why is such a big fine? So let me share a story that happened at the association. Was that we had a buyer's agent showing property to their client, and they saw that the property across the street had gone live the day before. So that day, they went and go ahead and open that lockbox, didn't read the showing instructions and said by appointment only. And when they opened up that lockbox, there was a 14-year-old girl taking a shower. Not only does the buyer agent make the listing agent that they have no control of their listing, however, something else could have happened. So sometimes you think like, oh, I just showed the property, right? But you don't know what the terms of those showing the property had with the listing agent. So you failing to not follow the showing instructions, it's a $1,500 fine.
It's also entering the property without permission. That's another
Yep.
fine, right?
Well, it falls under that. So that's why it's a big hefty fine. So that's really, really big. So you really want to be careful. Anytime you see a listing that's active, please check the showing instructions. This is like very adamant, like just please check that.
And don't even walk on the outside of the property. That is a violation also if you do that. You enter the driveway, go to the side yard, it falls under the same category. People get very angry.
Yeah.
I had a listing and people on vacation and they came home early. His agent was in the backyard drinking wine with their clients and having cheesy crackers.
It's really a beautiful day.
Yeah, and they said, of course, she yelled at me because like I'm responsible for it. People said, I got nothing to do with it. So, yeah.
Right. And it makes you look bad as a listing agent when it was somebody else failure to check the showing instructions, right? So not only does the buyer's agent looks bad, you affect the whole transaction. And I know it's tough to get clients. So once you do that to a client, you think they're going to trust you? No, because they're going to tell you, why am I going to list it with you? You have no control, right? So we really want to be careful with that. We really want to respect the industry in regards to that.
You address also the obligation to have a representation agreement before showing your property, and also whether that applies to lease listings or lease transactions.
Okay, So you do have to have a BRBC. I know CRMLS is not really coming down on that yet. Not yet. That's why they're creating that buyer.
Okay, okay.
I don't even want to talk about that today, Richard. So just so you know, you guys are aware of the DOJ and NAR settlement that happened last August, right? All of you guys know, right?
Yes.
Yes, you should know. So one of the terms under that settlement was that MLSs are going to be held responsible for collecting that BRBC every time one of those agents that belong to CRMLS show a property. Just so you know, CRMLS is in the works of creating something for buyer's agent to go ahead and register those BRBCs with CRMLS. Everything is still in the works. When that's available, Richard can invite me and I'll go ahead and share that with you guys. But just so you know, you do need to have an agreement. It's just not a CRMLS rule. It's a state. It's a state.
It's the law.
It's the law. Okay.
So if you're showing that, someone's coming to your listing, and so you actually in advance ask them to show you, send you that?
Well, technically, the listing agent is not supposed to ask that because you're not managing that. However, if a buyer agent showed a client a property and they don't have that, then it's going to be consequences for the buyer's agent, not for the listing agent, because that's not your responsibility to check other people's client, whether they have agreements in place.
So
So
that's on leases too.
correct, it's on leases. It's on everything, any property that's listed, whether it's a lease, a residential, please have a BRBC or have some written instructions that you have an agreement with that client.
Here's my understanding for lease property, or if you're showing a lease, that you have no obligation to have a representation agreement signed. It's suggested because you may not be compensated.
Well, that just comes to commission, but according to the law, anytime you show a property, you need to have one. Has it been like something that's being enforced? No. However, is it going to be enforced?
Yeah.
Yes, when? I don't know, because it's up to the MLS when they're gonna do that. But just as a practice, I would just get the BRBC, have it in your file. The last thing you need is someone to audit you even from the Department of Real Estate just because you didn't have it. So my recommendation, just have all your paperwork in place before you do that.
You know, like what you are saying, sometimes they gonna sign it if they like the property. So that would be only for that particular property. So how we should treat it that?
Well, let me ask you something. So that's your work, right? I'm the kind of person, it's like, I don't like to work for free, but if I took the time to show you that property and you decided not to like it, why shouldn't we have an agreement in place from the beginning? I'm still doing the work. So you tell me, why wouldn't you have that? You like to work for free?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you want to have that agreement in place, right? So let's just say you're working with the client and the client's like, you know what, Cece, I'm not going to sign anything with you because I want to see the property first and I want to see if I like it. But Cece already did all the work. Cece looked up the property. Cece got you pre-qualified. Cece made the appointment. I still did the work. Whether your client decided to submit an offer, why does it change the fact that you still did work for them? Because the BRBC is for you to get paid, right, for the work that you do for your client. So that's why when people tell me, well, should I have a BRBC? Well, I don't know. Do you like to work for free? And make sure you have those BRBC completed before you submit an offer, because a lot what we're seeing is that people are submitting these offers, they have a signed BRBC, but that BRBC doesn't have the amount that you're getting paid. Okay, so just be careful with that.
So I have a client and I give them access to the property, but I'm on a tight schedule and I want to leave and just allow them to go through the property at their own discretion. Is that permissible?
No, that is not permissible because you are responsible for your client being there. What about if something happens when you're not there? Guess who's going to be responsible? You, because you gave them that access. And not only that, how do they get into the house if it's a lockbox? I mean, now you're sharing your super key. So that's another violation because technically they're not the ones that have the right to have that Supra. So now you have two citations. You're sharing your key. You're giving somebody access without you being there. That's a big liability. And a lot of people say, oh, it's because I was busy, Cece. I was closing like $1 million sale. I don't care. You have other agents that they can go with your client. So be really careful with that because a lot of listing agents are reporting even people within their office in regards to that.
So, But there are many people that they might show up and say that I have an agent, but the agent is not there. So that's not.
Then it's up to the seller or listing agent to say, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and let you enter the property. As a listing agent, I'm not gonna do that because I don't know what you're gonna do into the home without your client.
When somebody reporting you, do you know who did it?
Well, yeah, because they give me the person's name, and if they're a member with us, I have to report it. Let me
So-
tell you, I get about 5 calls a day just in regards to that.
That's a lot.
I get like 20 different stuff, but that's a very popular one. I get about 5 calls a day from people calling me saying, hey, Cece, what's it called? I sent my client, and now something happened and the listing agent's mad at me. Now the seller wants to do this. What can I do? I'm like, nothing, you're in trouble. Because you send your client without you being there. So, I mean, we're not saying that our clients are bad, right? But we don't know. It happens. So just be really careful. Don't be careless into something like that.
So for instance, if somebody from my office reports me, I know who that.
Oh, so when somebody reports you to CRMLS, it's anonymously.
Uh,
However, if they file a formal complaint, you are gonna know who that formal complaint is because you're gonna have to go to hearing. So there's 2 types. If you just report it to CRMLS, it's anonymous. If you submit a formal complaint, I mean, it's complainant versus respondent. Yeah, so if it gets reported to CRMLS, it's anonymous. If they submit a formal complaint, well, you know who's filing the complaint against it, right? And the only anonymous complaints that we take as formal will be under Article 12. Article 12 means that you did a neighborhood report, you said that you sold all these houses when you didn't. We don't need to know who reported you because the evidence is right there within the flyer. So that's the only way that you can report someone anonymously. Yes.
When you do the listing for a lease,
Mhm.
you have to put a deposit. Let's say you are listing a property for 4,000. You put in 4,000 really fast and you reduce the price, 3,500,
Mhm.
say something. But you keep the deposit as 4,000. Is it not the new law says that you have to pay the same amount of the rent?
In regards to that law, I wouldn't be able to answer that. However, I refer you to the CR legal hotline for that. I wouldn't be able to advise on that.
Well, here's what I would say. If you were to arbitrarily just say, I don't like you, I don't like the way you look, or you have something else taking place, you have 2 children instead of 1, and I increase the deposit or the rent, that requires an adverse action notice. If you reduce the amount, you just have to be able to justify that, not just justify it, but you need to offer that, make that same offer to anyone else.
But her question is it the law that if you reduce the price, like let's say that the lease listing was listed at 4,000, she has a security deposit for 4,000, she had a price reduction of $500, now it's
Security
3,500.
deposit,
So she wants to know whether shouldn't that security deposit be now 3,500? That is the legal
My
question.
understanding,
Yeah,
it would then be 3,500.
so it does have to match.
It would have to.
That's the
Okay, so it does have to.
Unless you're
match for
considered a
brokerage.
small landlord. There's one exception, but there's very few exceptions.
That wouldn't be pretty much the MLS rules, because that's up to whatever the landlord and the client, decided to do, that's between. It's not a violation of the MLS rules.
Can you talk about the use of media?
Which part?
Unauthorized use of media, no permission, copying pictures from the MLS, copying pictures from Google.
Okay, so media has to deal with a lot of things. So I've kind of covered what's kind of popular. So anytime you have a listing, and I know this is very popular with listings, right? Another agent from a different brokerage had it. They didn't get the deal done, right? The client said they canceled the listing. A week later, they signed an agreement with you, right? And you look up the listing in the MLS, the pictures look exactly the same. And you're like, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to use the same pictures because it looks the same. Please do not go on to the MLS and copy those MLS pictures from the MLS. Even if you do have permission from the previous listing agent to use those photos, that permission is not for you to go onto the MLS and copy them, because anytime you upload any photos onto CRMLS, they get that copyright CRMLS. So if you're getting permission from the previous lease listing agent, they need to send you those pictures from the original file. Okay? Because I know a lot of people tell me, well, Cece, I have the PIA from CAR that they let me borrow the photos. Yeah, but the PI doesn't say that you get to go onto CRMLS, copy those photos, because now you're in copyright violation. And that's a $1,500 fine. So just be really careful. Or if your client says, oh, I took these, make sure that your client really did take this and not just say, oh, I did. Well, technically, Cece, I paid the listing agent to take those pictures, so they're mine. And then we have a case where, no, she didn't. It was part of like the agreement that we do that for them. They're not hers. So just be really careful with that, okay? Because that's a hefty fine, yes.
So if I'm making a flyer, can I take the photos from CRMLS or
No.
how do I get the photo?
The only way that you can, the only way that you can do it is if you do a cloud CMA. You guys, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, right? You can do that because that gives you a disclosure, right? But if you're doing your own, no. Don't do that. Yeah, it's not my rule, it's the RMLS rule.
So are you referring to that if I wanna do an open house for somebody else?
So yeah, so let's say that you're doing a flyer, right? If you're doing you have a listing agent, for whatever reason, they can attend the open house, right? But they're telling you like, hey, do you want to go ahead and do the open house for me? And they don't give you their flyers, or asking you to create your own flyers. Make sure that you're not using a copyright photo from CRMLS. Make sure that they send it to you, or you know that you're gonna go show it, go take a picture of the house. It's your photo. So be really, really careful. Yeah, because in CRMLS, it's only $1,500, but you guys heard about that big lawsuit we had about 4 years ago, Zillow had with the photography company. They charged $15,000 for each picture they had on there. So you might think it's a hefty fine. Outside of CRMLS, you're looking at $15,000 per photo, because it's a copyright is a big, big thing right now, especially on social media with influencers and all that good stuff. So be really, really careful with that. Okay, when you're showing property as an open house and you want to do like, hey, you know what? Richard Moore is a listing agent, right? And he has an open house and I don't have my client with me because my client's out of town, and I start recording. You don't have the right to do that. The seller didn't give you permission to do that. You need to get permission
That's a
from
very good point.
the
Thank you
listing
for bringing that
agent.
up.
Popular right now. You need to get permission from the listing agent or seller that you have permission to record. So be really careful with that, because I have a lot of agents that go to these broker previews and they go on Facebook Live and start taking these like, oh, here, the 123 Main Street is coming soon, guys. Please be sure that you have permission to record inside the home.
So
Okay.
it's a writing, in writing, the permission should, right?
Yeah, everything should be in writing in real estate.
Then what about unauthorized use of MLS information, for example, in regards to expired listings?
Well, I don't think they let you run the expired listing somewhere, right?
You know, I don't know if you can run it, you might be able to figure that out, but,
So a lot of people think, that's a good question. So, a lot of people think like, you know what, TC, I pay for the MLS, right? So I should be able to use the data however I want. If I want to run a list of expired listings, I can do that because I paid to use the MLS. Well, the client who had that listing agreement with that listing agent didn't sign up that if the deal didn't go through, for them to be on a calling list for you to call them as the lead. Not only that, you want to be careful because sometimes these expired listings, these clients are on the do not call list. So if you call them, not only are you facing a problem with CRMLS, but they can't even go to DRE with that. So you really want to be careful, and CRMLS doesn't let you use expired listings for you to do cold calling, unfortunately.
you can say, I saw the sign come down and knock on their door and say, did you sell your, it doesn't appear as if you sold your property. Don't ever say you got the information from the MLS for an expired listing.
Because you're not getting it from the MLS,
You're not getting it from the MLS, right?
right? You got it from like a third party site.
Yes.
I'm going back to where you're taking the picture and sending it to someone when you're not allowed to. Okay, like, let's say you have clients outside the state, but they want to see a house. And if you haven't gotten permission to do a video from the agents, can you just take a phone call or a
Facebook
and
Live or
show
something.
with the camera and not record as if they were in the house?
I would still get permission just because that could be your intent, like saying, hey, you know what, TT, I'm not actually publicly showing it to the whole public, right? I actually have my client on FaceTime, right? Well, you don't know who that client on FaceTime has in the background.
Okay.
So that's why I always tell people, just get permission, whether if it's gonna be like, hey, you know what, Richard, my client's at state, unfortunately, they're not here, they had family emergency, but they really like the property, they just kind of want to take a look at it. It's okay if I do like a FaceTime call, or is it okay if I just do a little video for them and I just send them to them directly? Get that permission. Okay.
So go back to expiring. So this weekend, my listing expires and all of a sudden my client's getting all these calls, right? So should I have him just take down name and number and start this?
So you know what? Please don't do that to me.
I'm just saying, right?
No, so this is the thing, right? In order for you to be in violation using expired listings, your client can write every name down, right? Because I get that call saying, hey, Cece, I just turned my listing into expired. I even put something in private remarks that the seller is not going to list because they decided to no longer move. They want to stay in that property. Listing agents don't care. They'll still call that seller, right? And that seller can be like, oh my God, I had 20 people call me. I told my agent that I didn't want to live because I just had a death in the family. I don't want to move anymore, right? But people don't read those private remarks. They just say, oh, it's expired. Let me go try to get the listing, right? And if the person that you're calling can prove to me that the person calling them got the data from CRMLS, then you're in violation. Because remember, anytime you file a formal complaint, the burden of proof is on you. You have to show me that, hey, this person called me because they got that information from CRMLS.
And my client's word is not good enough.
How do they know they got the information from the MLS?
Because you got a call, this doesn't happen, this happened last year or something. Also, the guy calling, you know, hey, I'm getting all these calls, people say they know it's expired and they're telling me it's expired and they want to get the listing. And they're angry, I said, well, I can't help them. That's just what it works. When it expires, it expires. I have no control.
So as long as they prove, because if you go to hearing, like I tell people, anybody can file a complaint against you, right? But it has to be legitimate. You can't just call me and say, you know what, TC, this happened, and I know that they got it from the MLS. But how do you know that? How do you know that their company doesn't have leads where they get that? Or how do you know that that person's not working with the title rep where they got that list of expired listings?
Right now, my question is, I get that, but if my client is telling me this is exactly what this person said, that I see your house is expired and I'm calling you, would that be good enough?
They'd have to sign a declaration or maybe appear at the hearing.
So they do have to prove that it came from CRMLS. But if they got it from like a title rep or they got it from company who scrape stuff, well, technically you're not in violation of the MLS rules because they didn't get it from the site. They're calling other listings.
Tell them to send a listing agreement.
So,
First.
so I
It's
just to
okay.
clarify that some people buy expired listing, so they shouldn't.
Well, okay, so let me just clear this up. You can buy expired listings. You can call on expired listings. Just don't run the list in CRMLS and get the expired listings from there. Does that make sense? So the rule is just you cannot run a list of expired. You cannot log into the MLS and say, hey, you know what? I want to run a report from this time to this time, and this county. I want to see how many expired listings happen in the MLS. You cannot do that. But if you're working with the title rep, you're working for a third-party site where they're giving your expired listings, well, you're not getting that data from CRMLS. You're getting it from third-party sites. So you're not in violation of the rule. So the rule is that you can just not call expired listings that are listed in CRMLS. Now, if you get it from your title rep that you see an expired listing and you also see it on the MLS, well, you got the data from your title rep. You didn't get it from here. So you wouldn't be in violation. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're not telling you that you cannot call on expired listings. You can call all the listings you want on the canceled listings, right? You just cannot get the expired data from CRMLS directly.
Is there somebody actually monitoring that? So let's say I go home right now and I run a listing at 10 and then I start calling. But
Well,
are you guys actually, so is there someone in your office, but okay, I'm gonna get this guy?
not at OCAR. No, it's just me, T, and Rodney. It's only 3 of us. However, CRMLS does. So typically how that rule works, like how does CRMLS manage this, right? CRMLS doesn't go in there and like, okay, we have somebody who just runs this, right? Typically the way it works is that somebody calls CRMLS and say, hey, you know what? My client called me that this person from CRMLS got this. And sometimes what CRMLS compliance can do is they can do an audit on your username and see if you really did run a list with your username running that data, right? Now, Cece, T, and Rodney, we don't have the ability to do that because we don't work for CRMLS. However, does they report it to me? I will report it to them. And that's when, they start the investigation. So is there a way that they can do it? Yes, they can do an audit. However, do they have someone doing that? I don't think so. No. But it could happen, right?
Yeah, there's 88,000 members of CRMLS, so that's hard by police.
Yeah, so it's pretty much only when you get reported when they'll go ahead and do that audit for you, right? And I mean, you really have to be bad for them to do an audit investigation on you, but I feel like the RMLS is like the IRS, right? You can get away with it for so long, but once they catch you, wow, they're gonna catch you and they're gonna go back and tell you this and this and this and that. So be really careful. Yes.
Regarding the pictures that you mentioned, sometimes the digital staging, sometimes, they probably copy something else. It's not our fault, it's a other company, right? So
Well-
we don't know.
Well, you're the listing agent, right? So as a listing agent, you're responsible for everything. You can't just say, well, I hired this company, Cece, this is what they gave me. At the end of the day, you're the listing agent. It is your responsibility to check the accuracy, to have the permissions to go ahead and enter that property into the MLS.
And another thing is that, like the condos or the apartment building, they have their own pictures. And it seems that picture, when you are posting the picture, the unit for that building, sometimes they use that picture because.
Is that picture branded or did they take a picture themselves?
Oh, it is branded.
So if it's branded, it's a violation.
Oh,
It's a violation, okay? Be careful with that. That's why I tell people, a lot of people try to come and say, hey, Cece, I want to appeal this citation because I hired someone to take those pictures and I trusted them and I just went and go ahead and enter those photos. Yeah, but it's still your responsibility to check whether that was correct or not correct. You can't just say, oh, I'm the listing agent, I use a company, it's not my fault. No, it is your fault. It's your responsibility to check that you're in compliance with the rule.
That happens a lot with amenities,
Okay,
where people grab pictures from another listing and put it on their listing, and you see it all over the.
and honestly,
MLS.
they report you. And sometimes it's from other, like you'll see that it's not an OC, you'll see that it's an MP or LG. You're still in violation because you got it from CRMLS. I know you had a question, sir.
So if you're navigating on the MLS, does MLS know exactly where you went and what you printed?
I don't know if it's like they have that, to be honest. I don't know if they have the capability to like kind of log in as you and see like everything you do. I don't know if they're like into that level. I just know that they can do an audit, like let's see if you ran an expired listing. And I only know that because I had a case and I'm like, how did you do it? Okay? I always want to know like, how did you catch them? So I could tell you not to do it, but that's the reason. But in regards to like, hey, they're like able to audit everything. I don't know how much of it they can audit, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I don't know if they're
The
auditing like
digital
every click.
footprint is I click on different pages and I'm on the MLS for half an hour navigating and I print reports. They're monitoring surveillance in that.
I don't know if they're monitoring that, but I know that they can do audits on it, right? They can say, hey, we got a report on this. They can go onto your account and see what you did. But like in regards to live monitoring you, I don't think they have that capability, but
Well,
I don't know
Well,
because
not
I don't.
necessarily live, that's why you log in now, right now,
Mhm.
and I'm in there for half an hour. I log out, they can go and check to see where exactly I went, every second, what page, what I clicked.
I don't know. I don't know how, if they're that expensive.
So
To that
Google-
degree.
Google can already do
Go
that.
in, so when they see, they can go in and see that you ran this report, then how would they know?
That's why I said, I don't know how much of them they're monitoring when they do their audit. So sometimes companies, when they do audit, because I know that from our end, we have a data system, we use Abacus where I track all the cases, right? I'm able to do an audit for my assistant. I'm able whether, hey, did you do this? I'm able to do that, right? But I'm only able to audit for so long. I can't see if my assistant actually click here and click that. My platform doesn't give me that access. That's what I'm saying. I don't know how much of that access they have to go ahead and monitor that, if that makes sense. So it's like, there's like certain degrees, but I don't work there, so I don't know if they do have that. So it depends on the platform. I hope that answers your
Because
question.
when I said if you run an expired listing report, then I report it. How would they know?
Because they log into that person, but your question to me is, you're
How would
asking,
they know I logged in from 11 to 11:30? But how would they know what I print?
well, because they
My
see that you,
activity.
well, they're not gonna, I don't know if they're gonna see what you printed, but anytime you go onto the MLS, they check your activity, right? So if you're going onto the MLS, you click on search, you click expired listings. Usually when you click on expired listings, 0 to 180 days, you put the city and everything, you get a report, right? It generated a report under your account. So because it generated a report, that stays on there, because when, let's say that you were on it for 30 minutes, you generate that report, right? You log out. The next day, you want to see, you go under recent searches, you click on that, it's going to pull up the report you did yesterday. So that's the reason how they do a lot. But if you don't run a report, you just click on it, it's just there. But if you're looking at a property, it does show that you looked up that property. So just be careful with that. I just don't know how extensive it is. Does that make sense?
But it doesn't seem as if Sarah MLS uses any form of AI to monitor all the reports that you're running.
The only AI they use is for the photos that I know of. Anytime you upload a photo from CRMLS, it's double watermark. I know that they use AI for that. But in regards to anything, and they use AI for the property description. What's very popular right now is that a lot of people love, like, oh, I love how Cece did this property description. It's exactly what I want to say. Let me go ahead and copy.
That's a violation.
That's a violation, all right? Because you're taking somebody else's work and doing it to put it on yours without your permission. So the photos and the property description is AI monitored. Yes.
On, the photos, so there's a listing agent A.
Mhm.
That's taking photos, put it on the MLS. Agent B calls agent A, hey, can I use those photos? Agent A gives consent. And agent B goes in the MLS, takes those pictures, you're saying they cannot?
No, because remember, anytime,
Because those pictures don't belong to MLS, they belong to agent A.
well,
That's not necessarily true either.
let me
They're
correct
uploaded, they
you.
belong to them.
So let me go ahead and give clarification on that, right? You're the listing agent, you have the rights to use those photos, right? But anytime you enter a photo onto CRMLS, it's gonna get copyright, right? So CRMLS has now the copyright authorization to do that. So if agent A gave permission to agent B to use those photos, agent A needs to send agent B the photos from the original file. That doesn't give, correct, that doesn't give permission for agent B to now go on to CRMLS and copy that, because now agent B, what they're doing is that they're copywriting those photos because it had that CRMLS trademark. So that's why I like to be very specific when you're getting permission. Make sure that they send you the original.
Oh, I see what you mean, down at the bottom.
Because if agent B, what happens and how they get caught is that, let's say agent B gets a permission from agent A, right? And agent B says, oh, I'm just gonna copy them. What's gonna happen when agent B enters those photos onto the MLS, now it's gonna have a double watermark. That's the thing. So now it gets doubled. So that's the reason why.
Since you brought up descriptions, can you briefly go over like what words to avoid, the main words to avoid when running a description for a property?
You mean in regards to fair housing?
Yes.
Okay, so fair housing is very popular, right? And this is popular in leases. You cannot say, I want woman only, or preferably male, or this is perfect for a family, or this is walking distance, right? You don't want to say this is walking distance because not everybody can walk. Or this would be perfect for a family, because what about if there's a single person that doesn't have a family? Why can it be good for a single person? So you really want to be careful when using terms like, oh, we only want males, we only want females, because then you're going into fair housing, discrimination type of deal. So you just really want to be careful when it comes to that language. I know CRMLS does have a list of what words to use that I can send to Carlos, and you can pass that to your office as a guideline for you guys. I can definitely do that after. But be really careful with fair housing, because this is not a violation of CRMLS rules. It's also a violation of the Department of Rules.
I want to go back to the expiration. Is it also cancellation, is that the same thing? Or no?
Well, I don't think there's a rule in CRMLS saying you can
Oh, cancellation.
cancel listings,
Got it.
right? So that's gonna be a.
The guideline is you're only to use it for the purpose of marketing and selling property.
Yeah, because what consumers are saying that are listing these houses in CRMLS after the listing expires or canceled, but the whole complaint came to CRMLS that they decided to make this rule. They were getting calls from consumers and saying, why should I list my house with Richard Moore who belongs to CRMLS if after I cancel that listing, my phone's gonna be blowed up. When I signed this listing agreement, I didn't sign up for, hey, if this doesn't work out, let me get all these calls from people. So consumers were actually calling CRMLS. It became such a big problem. That's why CRMLS decided to create this rule, because it became a consumer problem. And I know it's still happening, whether agents are getting this data from CRMLS. I know that if your client cancels or expires, we already know that our client's phone is gonna blow up, right? And even if we give them a warning, they still get mad. So,
Just want to have something that's defensive.
so just be careful with that.
So I would say it applies to cancellations and expires. Okay,
How could that person possibly be calling agent? I don't know. The question is, how could that person possibly prove that the calling agent got the info from CRMLS?
if they ask, right, and someone tells them, then it's their word against the other person's. Actually, what I've witnessed on these hearings, the agent who is actually the respondent who's being accused of this doesn't even know. So they'll sit there and say, oh yeah, I use the MLS as my source to make these calls.
So sometimes they kind of incriminate themselves.
They do, people incriminate
So
themselves because it's a lack of
Your
knowledge.
client can report this, right? And they can say this will move forward for a hearing. Keep in mind, only because somebody files a complaint against you, doesn't mean you're in violation. You're not in violation until after it goes to hearing, right? Well, after the hearing. So if the client says this and there's no like legit proof in their complaint, however, if you have the respondent at the hearing like, well, I'm a member of CRMLS, so I got it from CRMLS. It's like, well, there's your proof. And Richard can tell you, he sits on the panels, he's a presiding officer, and it has happened that sometimes you guys stitch yourselves. So just be really careful with that. Okay.
It's all purpose information.
Yeah.
Well, Cece, thank you.
Never problem. Happy New Year.
That was excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Cece. Appreciate it. She did bring some gifts, by the way, for everybody.
I'll go ahead and give you guys my business card so you guys can call me. The best way to get a hold of me, I'm on the field or I'm in hearing, send me an email and I usually respond within 24 hours to your email, okay? Please try to email me before you commit to violation.
And then as everybody turned their business cards in, I would say nobody has, right?
Richard, what happened? I've been searching for my clients to visit. Most of everybody, I tell you, probably 80% of the houses that we found were in city.
Well, that's an issue. Hi. How are you? If you look at the real very last, sale, it also is inclusive of lease listing. But CRMLS is not enforcing the clear cooperation policy regarding what are you talking about? And so that's been a problem. Something like identify, sort of out, general counsel.
I'll put one in.
So even my client doesn't do
Yes, yeah.
it.